Welcome to my presentation, Buzzing About Bees, an exploration of action-based storytelling. So I'm going to ask you to begin by imagining that you're 10 years old, like these children pictured here. Born in the mid-2010s, you will have grown up in a world defined by environmental crisis. Depending on where you are living, your experience may vary greatly. As a child in Pakistan, you might have seen the devastating impacts of flooding. In Australia, you may have already witnessed forest fires. Whereas in the UK, your experience may still be limited to being told that winters are warmer and wetter than when your family members were young. What does connect you and all other children growing up today is that despite extensive differences in how your life has been impacted, your future will involve navigating complex environmental issues. Now, in their article Exploring Climate Storytelling, De Meyer and colleagues opened by envisioning the world as it could be in 2030, when children today may be beginning early adulthood. And they say, as a concept in the public mind, climate change is omnipresent and widely accepted. Popular media report it freely and frequently, mostly through stories of people and communities acting on climate change. Society is decarbonizing at a breakneck speed, and stories are abound of individuals and communities at local, national, and international levels discovering new ways to limit or draw down carbon emissions. These discoveries are driven by genuine ingenuity, natural solutions, and technological development in energy, transport, construction, and food. There are also testimonials of local communities overcoming the inequalities and risks of climate change already underway, and universal stories of challenges confronted and overcome. In brief, climate change has become part of the fabric of everyday life, the backdrop against which life's choices play out. So De Meyer and colleagues consider that this picture of society is one which is necessary, but one which is far removed from our current trajectory. So the question is, of course, how do we get there? Now that is, of course, as I'm sure we all know, a huge question, and not one which has a simple answer, but at the same time, one which has many answers. So in seeking to answer this question, De Meyer and colleagues turned their attention to the understanding that when we look at how we communicate about environmental crises and seek to influence people's attitudes and behaviours, the prevailing attitude is that climate stories need to focus predominantly on awareness raising. They write that the preoccupation with only awareness raising has actually led to a poverty of stories, where the majority of stories do little to help people understand how to engage with meaningful action, thus creating a widespread lack of agency. And so De Meyer and colleagues talk about the fact that we need to focus our efforts and attention on what they term action-based stories. These are stories which support people to concretely understand how they might act on climate and environmental issues, engaging with actions that go beyond those typically associated with pro-environmental action. And the importance of environmental storytelling is not a novel discussion. However, by drawing on research across neuroscience and psychology, De Meyer and colleagues specifically show how we need to tell stories which go beyond helping people understand what is happening and which develop people's capacity to act, hence action-based stories. So a few years ago, I became really interested in this idea of action-based storytelling, and it led to myself and a colleague of mine, Sarah Williams, developing the Buzzing About Bees project. As researchers who had been working with the subjects of nature and children for a while, we became interested in the idea that if we are to adequately and appropriately equip children with the skills they need to act in response to environmental concerns, we might consider the value of integrating action-based storytelling into environmental education strategies. To examine this, we developed a workshop model which integrates the principles of action-based storytelling through a series of activities carefully adapted for the primary context. A pilot version of this workshop was tested in 2021, with an updated version being developed for the project in 2023. The workshop model we designed focused on the issue of bee decline and was designed for 7 to 11-year-olds in mind. We ran 9 workshops with 7 primary schools in the southwest of England between January to March 2024. So the workshop began with the children watching a film performance of a dance show with 2 dancers, Maya Carroll and Reuben Brown. This follows the tale of a young anthropomorphized bee called Bibi, played by Carol, who is essentially trying to find her purpose, but is struggling to do so in a world of pesticides and flower scarcity. Bibi is eventually helped by another bee character, played by Brown, who helps her find a place to live, which has been planted with an abundance of wildflowers, and she's able to kind of search for her purpose. Following their watching of the show, children were provided with an opportunity to develop their own dances. We began this activity by discussing the challenges Beebe's character faced during the show, and then all the different ways that we as humans could support bees like Beebe. Children were then tasked with developing their own shows in groups, which told different stories of people helping bees. Children were given creative freedom regarding the story they could tell, with the brief only requiring them to use dance to show humans helping bees in some way. The intention of the second activity was to move children beyond being told how they can help bees and to give them an opportunity to really embody the experience of being in that position of helping bees. Our next step in the workshop was to make the metaphorical tangible, and we achieved this by teaching children how to plant wildflower seed pots using bee-friendly seeds. The workshop ended with 2 research activities, a survey and a group discussion. Through this work and our subsequent analysis, we explored how this action-based storytelling experience helped inspire children's learning and interest in the subject, and how this workshop experience might have supported children's agency. So moving on to findings, it's going to be a bit of a quick blast through a lot of data, but hopefully I can give you some insight into the most important outcome. First, we studied the workshop model's potential value for encouraging children's interest in engaging with environmental learning. Our findings point towards 2 key understandings. First, we observed how disrupting the typical classroom format, intersecting educational content with activities perceived as playful, motivated learning. These quotes exemplify this well, pointing to how children really appreciated moving beyond fact-based approaches and engaging with active experiential learning. Second, following the workshop, children showed independent interest in learning more about bee decline and increased empathy towards bees. And critically, they started to make connections between their own lives and the challenges facing bees. These quotes in question are just a couple I pulled out, but again exemplify how children really became excited by this idea of bees and also started to think about their shared vulnerabilities. With regard to exploring agency, we first considered how children related to the idea of helping bees following the workshop. The main thing we found was that the personalization of knowledge about bee decline, linked to it being introduced through fictional storylines, encouraged children to emotionally connect to the issues under scrutiny. Children shared feelings spanning from concern for the character Beebe through to feeling as if they were a saviour somehow when creating these stories about helping bees. Our survey findings support this and indicate that broadly children felt that they knew how to help bees, with a large majority intending to follow through on this knowledge in their actions. So 90% said that they now knew how to help bees, and 74% said that they definitely would help bees. Indeed, in our group discussions, many children specifically articulated some intention to support bees. With such as this lovely quote here, with one girl talking about specifically planting bee-friendly flowers. The intentions articulated by children have been strengthened through feedback provided by teachers, which suggests that children have continued to be enthused about environmental learning. This goes some way to support the understandings regarding the power of self-persuasive effects, that once one engages with an action and gets a sense of satisfaction from it, they are more likely to continue engaging with similar actions. Overall, our research really highlighted how the workshop model supported children's empathy for and emotional connection with bees, as well as a sense of agency and motivation to support bee populations. So linked to this, in our publication, which is now out in Environmental Education Research, we developed a model which educators can draw on in developing further action-based storytelling workshops, which follows the steps taken in our own. Since this project, we have continued to think about this work and develop it further. For example, you can see here some example pages from an accompanying Beebe the Bee storybook, which details the story about a young girl called Emily who helps Beebe, which I created just this year. Our personal intention is to use this in further research on action-based storytelling, which expands on what we have found already. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation today. And on the next slide here, you'll just find some references as well. Thank you.